My name was George Washington. I was born on the 22nd of February, 1732 in Virginia, in a modest but respected family of planters. My father, Augustine Washington, was a landowner, a respected man, though not wealthy. My mother, Mary Ball Washington, was a stern and resilient woman who taught me diligence, patience, and uncompromising honesty. When I was 11 years old, my father died. His death left our family in a difficult situation. We were not destitute, but my plans to study in England, as my parents had dreamed, fell apart. I stayed home and began building my life with what was at hand. In my youth, I took an interest in surveying. At 16, I became the official surveyor of Culpeper County. I ventured into the wild forests, measured lands, and drew maps. It was grueling work. Cold, heat, encounters with hostile Indians. But I learned to overcome hardships, to see the land, to understand its soul. At 21, I received my first military appointment. In those years, the English and French were vying for the lands of North America. I became an emissary of the governor of Virginia, sent to French forts with a message, a demand to abandon disputed territories. The French refused. I wrote a report that brought me my first recognition in the colonies. But the matter did not end with words. War broke out. In 1754, I led a militia detachment. We fought at Fort Necessity. It was my first battle and my first defeat. I surrendered. But even in defeat, I learned. I understood the cost of mistakes, the cost of haste. Despite the failure, my courage was noticed. I joined the British Army under General Braddock. At the Battle of the Monongahela, I witnessed the horrors of war. The British Army was utterly defeated. The general fell. Bullets whizzed around me. My clothing was pierced by 4 bullets, but I survived. The soldiers said I was protected by Providence. After the war, I returned to Virginia. I resigned my commission. I was 26 years old. I married Martha Dandridge Custis, a widow of a wealthy landowner. We had no children together, but I became a stepfather to her son and daughter. I focused on managing my estate, Mount Vernon. I expanded my lands, experimented with agriculture, and studied new methods. I was not just a soldier. I was a farmer, a master, a builder. But I never forgot my duty to society. I was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses. I understood that the future required not only swords, but also words, laws, and compromises. Meanwhile, storm clouds gathered over the colonies. Britain, needing money after the war, began imposing taxes we deemed unjust. The Stamp Act, the tax on tea, the laws on quartering troops, all of this sparked fury and resistance. I was not a radical. For a long time, I hoped for a peaceful resolution. But step by step, I realized Britain had no intention of listening. So I took the side of resistance. In 1774, I was chosen as a delegate to the First Continental Congress. There, we discussed paths to reconciliation. But when blood was shed at Lexington and Concord, there was no turning back. In 1775, the Second Continental Congress appointed me Commander-in-Chief of the Army. I accepted the command without fanfare or illusions. We had no real army, only militiamen. We had no navy. We had no money. But we had resolve. I began a campaign that stretched over 8 long years. We retreated and we triumphed. We froze at Valley Forge, suffered hunger and disease, but we did not surrender. I understood we could not defeat Britain in open battle. I waged a war of attrition, of wearing them down. I avoided major battles unless I was certain of success. I knew the value of every soldier. In 1776, we were defeated in New York. I barely saved the army. But then, on Christmas night, we crossed the Delaware and struck the Hessians at Trenton. It was a small victory, but it breathed new life into our struggle. I saw betrayal, My old comrade Benedict Arnold defected to the British. I saw intrigues in Congress, saw politicians far from the battlefields condemning my decisions. But I pressed forward. I secured an alliance with France. I knew we could not win without help. French ships and soldiers became the decisive factor. In 1781, we surrounded British forces at Yorktown. General Cornwallis surrendered. The peace treaty was signed in 1783. America was free. When the war ended, I was offered power. Some wanted to make me king, but I refused. I believed we had fought not to replace one tyrant with another. In December 1783, in Annapolis, I resigned my commission as Commander-in-Chief and returned to Mount Vernon. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. I dreamed of peace, of the land, of the simple life of a farmer. But peace eluded me. The country we had fought for was barely standing. The Articles of Confederation, under which the United States lived, were weak. The states quarreled among themselves, debts grew, rebellions flared. Without a strong union, America could fall apart. In 1787, I was elected president of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. We were not merely fixing the old system. We were creating a new nation. I rarely spoke in the debates. I listened. I guided. My authority united disparate interests. We wrote the Constitution, a document that changed the course of history. In 1789, with no real opposition, I was elected the first president of the United States. I was 57 years old. I took the oath in New York, the nation's capital at the time. I understood that every action I took set a precedent. There was no guidebook, no examples. I built institutions from scratch. I created a cabinet of advisors. It included Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, Henry Knox, and Edmund Randolph. Their disputes were fierce, but I believed that disagreement was the foundation of freedom. I advocated for neutrality in European wars. I signed treaties with Britain and Spain, strengthening our borders and trade. I faced rebellions, like the Whiskey Rebellion. Farmers rose against attacks on distilled spirits. I led the army myself, but without bloodshed. The rule of law prevailed. I took care to keep power within bounds. I knew that too much power in one pair of hands leads to tyranny. In 1792, I was elected for a second term. I hesitated, but agreed. The country was not yet ready for a change in leadership. During my second term, partisan divisions deepened. Federalists and Republicans argued over America's future. I disliked parties. I believed they divided the people. But their rise was inevitable. By the end of my second term, I was weary. I was 65 years old. I felt it was time to step down. In my farewell address, I warned America, beware the spirit of faction, beware foreign alliances, beware narrow loyalty to regions. I prayed the nation would avoid the mistakes of the old world. In 1797, I returned to Mount Vernon. I became a farmer again. I planted trees. I wrote letters. I welcomed guests. I watched the nation I had given my best years to grow. But fate had one final act of service in store for me. In 1798, when tensions with France escalated, President Adams asked me to return to command the army. I agreed, but fortunately, war never came. In the winter of 1799, I rode out to my lands during a blizzard. Upon returning, I fell ill. The illness progressed rapidly. On the 14th of December, 1799, I died in my home at Mount Vernon. I was 67 years old. My final words were simple. "'Tis well." I did not seek immortality. I sought to do my duty. I believed that freedom is not a gift, but a responsibility. I was not a perfect man, nor a flawless leader, but I did all I could. I was George Washington, soldier, farmer, citizen, and my cause lived on. What do you think of me after learning my story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe, like the video, and stay tuned. We're not saying goodbye yet.